Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, I really want to start making some videos about my role-playing game experiences lately, including things like playing Call of Cthulhu with my friend Anthony and how that went, because I never actually played it. But I really need to make this video too, because I've been meaning to make this video for a while. And what am I pointing at? Well, you've probably seen the title of the video, so you know. About 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, because it's now October of 2023, and I made this other video in early July of 2021. I made a video talking about the Mesa Subway series of amplifiers, and I was comparing the D800 Plus with the WD800 and the TT800. And I had all three of those, and I was giving my impressions. I had played with them for a little while, gigged with them, just kind of talked about the sound and all that kind of stuff. And I wasn't quite sure what I was going to keep, what I was going to do with them. So I made a decision. I kept one of them. Which one did I keep? Why did I keep it? Is this going to be useful for you or no? I don't know. Well, first thing is, the TT800, wonderful sounding amp, awesome. If somebody told me, today, hey, Ivan, the only amplifier you can ever play for the rest of your life is a TT800, I'd say, cool, it's great. I found that one was not for me overall in terms of the whole Subway line. After just saying I would play with it for the rest of my life, it's that good. And it was for a few different reasons. It was just, the voicing of it was great, but I found it was easier to dial in the sound I wanted on the other amplifiers. It was a little harder for me to control when it started to get a little dirty and when it started to get a little woolly sounding. And that's a great sound, but I didn't want it all the time. And I'm not saying it's a dirty amplifier. It definitely is good for clean sounds, but it was just something that was a little tougher. It was, despite my familiarity with the Fender Tone Stack and my love for it, in fact, I just reacquired an Alembic F1X because I like it so much. It was harder for me to dial in a sound that I wanted at the time with that than it was with the other amplifiers. And so it was a bunch of different reasons, and I just I can't keep all of them. Which ones am I going to really gig with? I didn't want to be in the position I am with basses. Which one do I take tonight? So that was the first one that I kind of eliminated and then sold it to a guy locally, and he was very happy. It was tough to get him then. I think it might still be tough to get him sometimes. The second one that I did not keep was the WD800. I love this amplifier. I regret selling it. I sold it to a guy in Europe. I think it was during a time when he really couldn't get any, so he was pretty happy with it. I think he still got it. And so why did I get rid of it? It was a little tougher for me to get the sound I wanted to on that than it was with the D800 Plus. By the way, I also ended up buying a D800 because, well, it used and it was cheaper, and it's also a really awesome amp. But I'll get to why I bought that, a little bit more a little later. But really, really great amplifier. It was just a little bit tougher for me to get the sound I wanted, but it sounds awesome. What do I miss about the WD800? I miss a bunch of things about it. I miss the kind of tube compression. At least it sounded like. It sounded like that kind of spongy feel, or like a baseball bat, hitting a trampoline sort of feel that you get with some amps, if you know what I mean. Maybe you don't. But that's what it sounds like to me. I missed that because it definitely had that sort of tube amp sound in spades. Next thing I miss a lot about the WD800 was the passive mids control. That's a great control. And it's kind of like having a passive tone control on a bass. Like a lot of my basses, this little pink Valenti bass right here, this Tobias right here, there it is. They're all active, but they have passive tone controls because that's a totally different animal. And if you have an active bass and it doesn't have a passive tone control, man, you're missing out. Those are great. So the passive mid control on the WD800 kind of acted the same way. It was different, but you're able to control the mids in a different way than you normally were with just an active EQ and all that kind of stuff. The really powerful EQ section of the WD800 was awesome. I'm not intimidated by a bunch of knobs, because you generally, if you know what you're doing, you barely touch them unless you have a problem. And then, I need to fix that. So it was cool, very intuitive, very nifty. The amp voicing is a little bit more mid-forward. It sounds as if it has less lows than the other one, which really isn't the case. It's just the mids are a lot more forward, or the voicing is a little bit different. So it's a great amplifier. It was just tougher for me to get the sound I wanted to as fast as I wanted to. And it was really kind of on the fence. But, I decided not to keep them both. And I regret that. I'd like to get another one sometime, or another two maybe. But why two? Anyhow, I was really kind of at the time, thinking about doing some stereo rigging or some wet dry stuff, which I still might do. And it's not very practical, but it can be fun. And one of the things I noticed, I got this Leo P split so I could split my signal. For the first thing that happened when I tried to set them up stereo was I noticed they were out of phase with each other. That being the D800 Plus and the WAD 800. And so you can see the lows were disappearing, all that kind of stuff. Things sound a little wonky. And so there's a lot of circuitry in these things. The phase, all kinds of things can happen to the phase. You're not guaranteed that 2 amps, you put them together and they sound great. The Leo has this great phase switch on it, and so I could switch the polarity by 180 degrees, which cured most of it, but not all of it. I could still tell there was just some phase issues. So I was not going to be happy doing any kind of stereo rig with those units where I wanted to use the front end preamp of both of them. So that was another reason I decided, well, let me go with one flavor, one model. And so that's why I ended up grabbing another D800 Plus and a D800 because these things tend to be in phase with each other. These are great amplifiers. Is there anything else I missed about the WD800? Oh yeah, the damping control. Man, that thing is subtle but awesome. When you can just change how the power amp is controlling the speakers. Maybe it's not as subtle as you might think. I really missed that. That was just a super, super game changer. As you mess with that, you could get totally different sounds. So yeah, it's a great amp. Really good amp. But I don't have one right now. Anyhow, so what did I like about the D800 and the D800 Plus? That not only did I keep the 800 Plus, but I bought a D800. The D800 is great. It's got this really small form factor. It's wonderful. The mid-range controls on the thing, I'm not going to tell you where they're dialed in because you wouldn't believe it. You can find out pretty easily, but they did a lot of blind testing. But yeah, the tone controls right here, man, they're dialed in the right place, and I barely have to use them, but they're cool. And it's just little, tiny, small. The only caveat or thing about this thing is that if you want to use like an external preamp or something like that and bypass the preamp, it doesn't have an effects return. It's got an auxiliary input right here, and the gain is not quite set quite as high on that, so you have to turn up your master volume more or turn up the output volume on your preamp more to get it to be as loud as the internal preamp here. But man, great head. This sucker right here, maybe more useful. This is little one's more useful for just plug and play, go, small form factor. This is a little more useful for me for doing a little extra surgery on the sound if I want to. The mid-range controls are sweepable, so if I really want to dial something in, I can find that and dial it in pretty fast. I like the bright switch. Little one doesn't have a bright switch. So overall, the voice on this is just a tiny bit brighter in flat mode than it is over the 800. And honestly, these are not dark sounding amps, but there's a lot of bright sounding amps out there, so these just aren't them. You can tweak it in. One of the reasons I kept the 800 Plus, I gravitated towards that, is when I first got that and the WD, those are the first two contenders, I noticed I could get a sound a lot closer to my old Demeter 201 with the 800 Plus by using things like the bright switch and dialing the right spot of the high mids and everything like that. And I couldn't quite dupe that same feel with the WD. And I just love the Demeter 201. That's like one of my favorite preamp sounds ever. And that's kind of like my go-to live sound. So much so that when I got a Quad Cortex, I was looking for captures of that sound, couldn't find any, and ended up buying another Demeter on the cheap because I had one, I sold it, and when I got these, and I was like, yeah, I kind of want that sound back. But anyhow, this can get pretty close to it. Also, if I want to use an external power preamplifier with the 800 Plus, it's pretty easy to do that with the effects return. So. And the other thing about these things that I really like is the voicing control, it's voicing on this one. And I've used a bunch of those global tone controls. I've had SWRs with the Oral Enhancer and Eden with the Enhanced Circuit, and there's a bunch of other ones. This one's really cool. It's really useful throughout the entire range. That was one of the things I wish that the WD had on it. I know it's a completely different amp, completely different circuit. I'm just saying, this would be my druthers. And so if I got a bass, like, you can't see in the picture, but I've got this blue Valenti, which is kind of mid-focus because it's got the pickups in the modern positions, and so if I want to scoop that out just a little bit, I can turn this voicing control and just find the right spot, and it's better. If I got my blue Verrazano Valenti, on the other hand, that's just a tiny bit mid-scoop, so I just don't do anything with the voicing control. I keep it all the way flat, and maybe if I really need to on a particular gig, I can bump the mid somewhere by finding that spot, although I usually don't have to do anything with it. So that's why I ended up keeping the D800 Plus and getting a D800. All the Mesa heads are still like super awesome. These are just the ones I went with, and these, you know, at the end of the day, this is like a really nice sounding solid state preamp, very, very musical sounding, really, really useful. You know, just the EQ section just does the right thing, and it takes like 2 seconds to get a sound. And you know, I gig a lot, and so that was really important to me. So yeah, so that's what I'm using. That's why I chose it. What about you? Have you chosen your Mesa head yet? Have you played Call of Cthulhu? I'll talk to you later, kids.